The United States dropped a $100 trillion bomb on the entire world. They dropped it on Europe, Africa, South America, Asia, and Australia. In fact, not one single country has escaped the blast. And that weapon is dollar-denominated debt. Our government does have $34 trillion in debt, which we mostly owe to ourselves. That is not the debt I'm talking about. Dollar-denominated debt is just a bond that's been issued by a country or a company that's priced and sold in US dollars. Why would another country issue debt that's priced in dollars? Simple Google search of the most liquid currency in the world will show you it's the US dollar, accounting for 85% of all currency trades, which is why dollar-denominated debt makes up 60% of all the currency denominated debts in the world. The Eurozone is 20%, Japan and England are 5%, and look, a tiny little China about 1%. Since the entire world uses the dollar for most of their debt and trade settlements, everyone wants to be paid in US dollars. Here's a list of the top 10 main types of dollar-denominated debt. Pause to read. I'm going to be focusing on sovereign bonds, corporate bonds, and Euro bonds, which are pretty much just bonds sold outside the US by international entities, but priced in US dollars. Here's a list of countries that have sovereign debt priced in US dollars. Yep, China's number one at $150 billion. Oh, look at that. Russia, number 5. 30 billion in sovereign debt. We're going to pay special attention to Russia because something bad happened to them recently. What about corporate debt? China leads the pack at, again, $250 billion of their debt priced in dollars. Russia, 30 billion again. India has about $650 billion in government debt, and about 80% of it is priced in US dollars. China has about $2.7 trillion in external debt, and about 85% of that is priced in dollars. Russia has just over $300 billion of external debt, and guess what? About 60% of it is priced in US dollars. At least it was. I'll tell you later. How come their debt has shrunk considerably since 2022? Because when they invaded Ukraine, countries stopped directly lending to Russia, so any Russian debt that there was came to maturity and nobody renewed it because they don't trust Russian debt. For that 100 trillion or more of dollar-denominated debt, 65 trillion is issued by non-US banks and shadow banks, sometimes cartels. Even though Russia invaded Ukraine and we heavily sanctioned them, we still allowed them to settle their trades in dollars. We allowed them to still issue and accept dollar-denominated debt. Not anymore. A few days ago, Russia was just hit by new sanctions, keeping them away from any kind of dollar-denominated debt. And now, anybody in Russia with 2 pennies to rub together are trying to get dollars out of the banks before the ruble plummets. Of course, Russia said that they're the ones who started this, and they are just going to start settling trade in yuan. Banks worldwide have been immediately jacking up the price of buying dollars. The Moscow exchange dropped by about 10 percentage points when the news hit. The sanctions will take full effect on August 13th. That's when things will start to get really, really bad for the Russian population. Panic is already setting in. So far, Kyrgyzstan banks have suspended all money transfers with Russia, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more of this. Now, Russia has no choice but to be forced into China's economy even further. Right now, you can say that Russia is under the economic suzerainty of China. The Russian ruble is slightly kept just over a penny. But because Russia has lost even more access to dollars, they are losing even more access to any kind of liquidity, meaning money. Because inflation is so bad in Russia, the interest rates are 16%. If the Russian government has to print more money, then you're going to see the ruble go below a penny. Of course, Russia is going to come running and begging to China for some liquidity, but China has to be extremely careful because they can't allow money to actually leave their country. The Chinese have been trying desperately to keep their currency at least 14 cents. But they've been failing. China currently owes Russia $30 to $50 billion in yuan, which is their currency, and they haven't let that money go into Russia's banks. They just tell Russia, look, you have a trade surplus with us. There may not be a more controlled currency than the Chinese yuan, and if billions of dollars of Chinese money goes into another country, into that country's markets, then they lose full control, and that could collapse their money, which means Russia and China are locked together. They can no longer settle their corporate, their Eurobonds, or their sovereign debt in US dollars. It's just going to be the yuan from now on. Maybe the ruble, but I doubt it because it's so worthless at this point. Russia is not going to be able to afford their war in Ukraine to the extent that they did. And now Russia is just an extremely weak ally of China. And that weak ally has a lot of resources that China wants. I'll let you do the math. So it's not just the United States military that is their strongest weapon, nor is the existence of NATO, which is the strongest military alliance in history. It is the ocean of debt and liquidity that is allowed to be priced in US dollars. And that $100 trillion or more of debt is nothing that you or I or any American citizen has to pay. It is between two parties who just choose our money as the safest bet. My name is the Geo Husar, and this comic behind me is the perfect description of Russia. Pause to take a look at this. Thanks for watching.